there is a umbrella diagnosis, which we call an autism spectrum disorder. And an autism spectrum disorder is characterized by certain criteria, but people can fall from the very severe end to the very mild end. And this is where I think a lot of the confusion comes in around the term autism and what it means. One of my first training experiences as a psychology intern was working with teenagers who at the time would have been diagnosed with Asperger's disorder and now would be diagnosed with high-functioning autism. And they were such a interesting, challenging, fun group to work with. And I think that understanding a little bit about how they present can be very helpful. So an individual with high-functioning autism may be able to function fairly well in society. Like, they're going to be able to hold a job. They're going to be able to do their basic life skills, like make themselves food, dress themselves, do personal hygiene. Those things are going to be no problem, or if they are a problem, a very slight problem that they can adapt to. The biggest difficulty that people with high-functioning autism have is around social interaction and communication. Another really common symptom in people with high-functioning autism can be sort of a tendency to have sensory overload. So, for example, they might do okay in a regular school setting or a regular classroom, but when it comes time for the pep rally or the assembly, they can become super overwhelmed and shut down. Or an adult with high-functioning autism might be able to go to the grocery store, but if they're, in an area where suddenly a large crowd develops, they might be significantly distressed because, number one, it pushes them outside of their routine and comfort zone, and number two, just everything kind of coming in from their senses is on high volume. And so when this happens, sometimes you'll see behaviors that they might seem rude, they might even be aggressive at times. And I want to be clear that I'm not saying that people with high-functioning autism are aggressive. I'm saying that if any human being feels trapped and in sensory overload, they might react by pushing somebody out of the way to get out of the situation. So this sensory overload is really important to think about when you're dealing with somebody or working with somebody and helping them to kind of structure their lives in a way that's going to allow them to be, as high functioning as possible.
So an Asperger meltdown is where a person with Asperger's syndrome has an overload of stimulation. So they have an overload and then they start lashing out. It could be uncontrollable crying, panic attack, out of breath. They could be thrashing about. They may actually hit their head, and I guess it's more often than not that that there's something kind of really like an outburst of anger, like you've reached your maximum capacity of what you can take with, and that's really what a meltdown is. So it kind of like comes on. So how does it happen? Now, a meltdown could happen because of a trigger.
They hear everything. Sounds that you may not even notice they hear. And they hear them all at the same volume. So as you listen to and are able to focus on my voice, they hear the fan blowing. They hear doors closing. They hear the wait staff clearing tables. They hear the woman 10 feet away rummaging through her purse. They hear a fire truck outside. They hear people walking to their seats. They hear someone pouring a glass of water. They hear the wind. They hear a car alarm going off. They hear someone coughing. They hear a cell phone ringing. They hear a baby crying. If this is what your world sounded like every minute of every day, what would you do to cope?
Okay, so there could be a single trigger that will trigger somebody. So it could be that triggers them to have a meltdown. It could be that they have been losing a lot of sleep. They're getting really, really cranky because, you know, having this condition also keeps you up at night. There's other ones where it could be an environmental factor, an environmental trigger rather than a personal trigger. These are all very varying factors of something that could actually happen. And why does it happen? An interesting one is, why do these happen? Why do these triggers occur? Now, the triggers happen because people with Asperger's syndrome like routines, so they like things to be the same. So say, you know, someone was doing halfway through their daily routine and then it changed suddenly. This could cause a meltdown because the overload of the consequence of changing that routine is just too much.
General consumption is in terms of meltdowns. Unfortunately, many with autism are not aware of the internal signals of meltdown on its way. And so sometimes it's other people who sense you're about to lose it, where the person, no, I'm not, I'm fine. But very clearly that's the case. So when the person is calm, I would recommend, on a large piece of paper, drawing a thermometer. And to go through on the left-hand side of the thermometer, what are the mannerisms, the actions, the thoughts, the behaviours, the situations, all the things that indicate meltdowns on its way. I do also strongly recommend use of a Fitbit or equivalent, which measures heart rate. So in other words, when she's getting upset, the Fitbit will indicate your heart rate is increasing. No, it's not. I'm okay. Have a look. Oh, it is 135. Yes, because your resting heart rate's 70. Oh, I didn't notice that. You need to do something about it. There are some that will actually vibrate if you reach a certain level. Prevention is better than cure. So, also, in going through that list of circumstances and behaviours, thoughts, actions that indicate meltdown, on the other side of the thermometer is what to do at each of the levels of agitation, and having a plan that should one occur of what to do. As I said earlier in this conversation, it's do's and don'ts. When I have a meltdown, in other words, leave me alone, I'll get over it, don't interrogate me, don't get emotional, negative or positive. I need to have a tranquility of seclusion in a refuge where I can go. Sometimes schools will need somewhere they can go to have that, shall we say, opportunity to calm down on their own, because people often cause the meltdown, but they will deepen it and prolong it if they're not careful. So when the person has a meltdown, it is very important to use a strategy, I call it GPS. You probably have those in cars in the United States. You may have a different term. But if you don't do what the GPS suggests, turn left, and you carry on, it does not say, what the do you think you're doing? I just asked you to turn left. You never turn left. You never listen to what I say, which only makes it worse. What the GPS says is, at the next junction, turn left. It does not tell you what you've done wrong. I want people to take on that approach that when somebody's made a mistake or it's going wrong, don't judge, criticize, because you're going to make the person worse. It's just, what can you do to alleviate the situation? So it's going through the do's and don'ts in that situation to try and minimize the depth and duration. Once they've occurred, that's it. Sorry, it's happened. You try and prevent it by seeing the build-up. I need to take a break. I need to calm down. Take a deep breath. Use a bit of yoga, meditation, or distraction, or whatever it is that you do to actually prevent them occurring. Afterwards, it's the art of apology and restoring the rapport and relationship. Otherwise, resentment builds up over you.